Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Megan and today we're going to be talking about the books I read in September. So the very first book I read was Just Mercy. This was an audiobook and this told the story of Brian, who is a lawyer, a pro bono lawyer, I'm pretty sure, that works with criminals or people who have been accused of crimes when they were actually innocent, and these people are set up for the death penalty. So it really goes into the intricacies of the justice system and how it is unfair and all of the intricacies of the death penalty and how that really affects people's lives, whether they are the one on death row or not. And it was super interesting. I highly recommend it, and I actually don't normally give like non-fiction-y books a rating, because I feel like it's weird to rate someone's life and someone's story or just someone's perspective and advice, but I 100% give this book 5 out of 5 stars, and I really want to watch the movie Just Mercy. Next, I picked up the sequel to Black City by Elizabeth Richards, which is Phoenix, and this is the second book of the Black City trilogy. Black City tells the story of a world in which vampires are considered evil, or I guess lower class, so they are segregated from humans, and we are following a twin blood who is half human, half vampire, and he falls in love with the daughter of the main president, essentially, like the council chair, or I forget what the official title of her mom is, but these two fall in love. It's like a Romeo and Juliet-esque story. If you've ever seen, oh gosh, what's that movie? There's a movie out there that like a zombie falls in love with a human or something like that. Anyways, it gave me those vibes. It feels like every other dystopian out there, but I'm still invested in a way. But in the sequel, I'm not going to delve too much into it, but the ending kind of made me angry. I want to pick up the third book and figure out how the ending happened, because it really irks me when that kind of thing happens. Without giving anything away, that's all I can say. But I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I am going to discuss the rereads I did to prep for sequels for the month. First, I picked up Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. It's still not my favorite series. I think I actually liked it less after the reread. The audiobook was super hard to follow, especially when we got into the other language-esque parts. But I think if you like dark academia, not academia, that's not the right word. If you like dark atmospheric kind of settings, and you like blood magic, and you like Alina and the Darkling vibes, I think you would like this. It's just not for me, which is strange because I like all of those things. I can't even explain what I don't particularly like about this, but I'm still intrigued to pick up the rest of the series. It's a weird kind of conflict that I'm experiencing with this series. Next, I reread one of my favorite books of all time, which is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, and I honestly forgot how much I loved this book until I reread it, and it really is a good audiobook as well. If you haven't picked this up, or if you're kind of hesitant to pick it up, I recommend the audiobook. It was really fun, and the characters all have really cool, distinct voices. There's some cool sound effects and everything going on, and it was just so enjoyable. In this book, we are following Spensa, whose father was labeled a coward after fleeing during the huge war of the century. And so now Spensa has to live up to and or exceed expectations set upon her by her father being a coward. Even the head of the spaceship military is not going to allow her into flight school, so she has to prove herself in flight school when she does manage to get in. But we're following her journey and also her flight, like her squad's journey, and I love this squad and I just love everything about this story. 100% 5 out of 5 stars and 100% recommend. Next, I reread Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I think the first time I read this, I gave it like a 3.5 stars. However, after rereading it, I think it's more of a 4 stars. I did enjoy it the second time around more. I think I had different expectations going into it the first time, which is why it struck a little lower. But this time, knowing exactly what was going to happen going in, for some reason helped it for me. And then alongside Vicious, I also picked up Vengeful, which is the second book of the duology. I believe that there's going to be an extension to this duology, but I don't think we're following the main characters from this. I think we're following side characters, if I remember correctly. I can't remember if it's Vicious and Vengeful or a Darker Shade of Magic series. It might be a Darker Shade of Magic, or it could be both. I don't know. I feel like V.E. Schwab's always adding on, but that's okay with me because I love her writing. Back to the books. If you don't know what Vicious is, it is the story of Victor and Eli who discover that they can experience a near-death experience in order to obtain supernatural powers. We are following a dual timeline in which the first timeline we are following Victor and Eli in college making this discovery, and the second we are following Victor and Eli 10 years later, who are now mortal enemies, and you get to figure out as the countdown to each other why they're enemies and what happened between them, and it's such a good story. Vengeful is the sequel. We are meeting some new characters in this book, and I love the character of Marcella. I think she was incredible. She made this book so much better, and I think the plot line was a lot more structured in this book, so I really enjoyed both of these, and now the series as a whole for me is 4 stars. Next, I picked up Check Please Book 2, Sticks and Scones. I did prefer the first book of this Check Please series, however this was really cute as well. This is a story of Biddy, who we follow throughout his 4 years of college. Book 1 is freshman and sophomore year, and book 2 is junior and senior year. Biddy is a YouTuber, a baker, a figure skater turned hockey player, and part of the LGBTQIA community. His story is really wonderful to follow. He is such a pure and wholesome character, and it's really interesting because in the back you can follow, I think they're called chirps, but it's essentially his Twitter. You can like follow along on his Twitter escapades alongside what's happening in the story, which I think is a really cool element to this. I think it's just an adorable story, and I give this one 4 stars. Next, I picked up Sadie by Courtney Summers. I read as an audiobook format. In this, we are following a dual timeline. The first is Sadie, who is on the mission to hunt down who killed her sister and get revenge. And her sister was like 13, I think, and was brutally murdered. Sadie is a really interesting character. She's very dynamic. She has a stutter, which really hinders some of her interactions with people, and I thought that was really interesting to follow. The second timeline, we are following a reporter or like podcast host, and he is going back and hunting down the clues and trying to figure out what happened to these 2 girls because Sadie has gone missing now. It's a really interesting dual perspective. It's so good. There's great disability rep, as I said. There's a lot of trigger warnings, so please be aware of that going into this. It was 5 out of 5 stars for me, especially in the audiobook format. And I highly recommend the audiobook format because it feels like you're following an actual podcast and you're actually there with Sadie or there with the podcast listening to the recordings. And it's really good. Next, I picked up Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. I gave this one 4 stars. We are following Mi Young, who is a gumiho or a 9-tailed fox. In this world, 9-tailed foxes can transform into humans. Their ability is to stay alive forever, but to do that, they have to suck the G or Gi. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's essentially like the soul out of men or boys. Mi Young always sucks the soul out of like criminals. One day, she comes upon a boy being essentially harassed and assaulted by a monster, so she saves him and loses her bead in the process, and her bead is essentially her soul, so anyone in control of her bead is also in control of her. It is her journey in high school because she attends the same high school as this boy, and keeping her secret and recovering her soul and dealing with being a 9-tailed fox that has to pretend to be fully human. It was really interesting and I enjoyed it a lot. There was parts where I felt like it was a little bit slow, which is why it wasn't a full 5 stars for me, but it was still really enjoyable and I highly recommend it for like a spooky seasonal read. Next, I picked up Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and illustrated by Faith Erin Hicks. And this is just a really fluffy and cute story about 2 seniors in high school who have worked at a pumpkin patch for every year. This is their final year as they, again, are seniors in high school and have to go off to college the next year. and it's their one last hurrah around the pumpkin patch, and we are following Deja and Josiah, or Josie for short, and Deja is trying to convince and assist Josiah in hunting down and talking to his longtime crush, and it's just their hijinks and story trying to find his crush and getting him to talk to her because he's very introverted and shy, and it's just a really cute and fluffy story. I don't really have much else to say about it, but it was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. Next is Once and Future by Corey McCarthy and Amy Rose Capetta, and I believe these two are in a partnership or in a relationship of some sort. I think they're married, but this is a King Arthur retelling in space with LGBTQIA plus diversity, and it's a gender-bent King Arthur retelling, so it's got so much going for it. It definitely delivered. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I don't want to go too much into the details because I think it is so worth reading and you should definitely check it out for yourself, but it's so good. Finally, and most surprisingly for the month/year even, is Wonder Woman Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo. In this, we are following Diana, who again is the princess of the Amazons. She is a superhero that we all pretty much know pretty well. Actually, I didn't know anything about Wonder Woman until I read that comic like 2 months ago and fell in love, and then I immediately needed to pick this book up, and I'm so glad I did. I think Wonder Woman is like my new favorite superhero, heroine, I don't know, superhero, but it was so good. So in this, we are following Diana. She is on her island until one day she sees a shipwreck happen, so she jumps in the water and saves this human. This human ends up being a Warbringer. A Warbringer is a descendant of Helen from Helen of Troy, like the huge Trojan War, and it turns out that they have some sort of energy surrounding them that causes people to argue and disagree and fight, and so every year a Warbringer is born is the year that a world war happens. Diana just so happens to bring the worst one yet to her island. So she has to take her back to the human world and cleanse her of this Warbringer trait and save the world. I just loved it. I just loved it so much, which is so surprising because I never expected to love a superhero this much. That's a lie, because I really love Spider-Man, Thor, Iron Man, and all of the Marvel superheroes, but I don't know, I never seemed or was interested in Wonder Woman, and now I'm obsessed with her, so that's where I'm at. But obviously this is a 5 out of 5 stars for me, and if you have any inkling of interest, definitely pick this up. And lastly, I'm not going to go too deeply into these, but I'm still working on Ruthless Gods, which is the sequel to Wicked Saints, and Circe. I think I've been working on Circe for like 2 months now, and it's definitely not because I don't like it. I'm loving it, but I'm just like, I don't know, not motivated to read in the slightest. So it's kind of a difficult month. Hopefully I'll finish these in October, but that is all for September's wrap up. Let me know what you read in September, or if you enjoyed any of the books that I talked about, and or are going to pick up any of the books that I talked about. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll check you in my next one. Bye, friends.